Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, News by Raven. It is Friday, January 7th, 2022. Happy New Year to you all. And it is movie weekend, first one of the new year. And our topic this week is the biopic Tolkien, featuring Nicholas Hoult and Lily Collins, among others. And joining me this week is my guest co-host, John Norris.
Hello, everybody. Good to be back.
And it's been kind of a crazy week for everybody, I think. But this was supposed to be something we were supposed to talk about last month, but unfortunately I had some health issues, and my doctors told me to take the rest of the month off from the podcast, pretty much. So that's what I had to do. So we've been kind of waiting to talk about this one for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And Mark Andrew is in the house. He says, welcome back to you, but not to me. He doesn't care if I'm here. But, yeah, it's an interesting time going on here. But let's go ahead and start talking about the film.
All right.
Tolkien, directed by Dome Karokoski. Written by David Gleason and Stephen Beresford. Produced by Peter Chernin, Jenna Topping, David Reddy, and Chris Thiker. Starring Nicholas Hoult, Lily Collins, Colm Meaney, Derek Jacobi, Craig Roberts, Patrick Gibson, Anthony Boyle, and Tom Glenn Carney. Production company is Chernin Entertainment. Distributed by Fox Searchlight Pictures. It was released originally May 10th, 2019 in the United States. I think it was like a week earlier in the UK. The running time is an hour and 52 minutes with a rating of PG-13. Let's go ahead and let you read what it's about.
All right. Let me enlarge my screen here. As young children being raised by a widowed mother, J.R.R. Tolkien and his brother Hilary receive help from a local priest, Father Francis Morgan, who must relocate them from their home to tiny apartments in Birmingham due to financial hardships. Their mother is supportive and loving, filling their minds with stories of adventure and mystery which she recites by the fireplace at night. Unbeknownst to the boys, however, she is terminally ill, and one day upon returning home from school, Tolkien finds her slumped in her chair, dead. Father Francis becomes the boys' legal guardian, and eventually he finds a kindly rich woman who agrees to take the boys in, providing them with room and board while they continue their childhood education. There, Tolkien meets Edith Bratt, the woman's only other ward. Tolkien is taken with Edith, whose piano playing he admires, and the two become friends. At school, Tolkien immediately shows talent with languages, earning rough treatment from a rival classmate, Robert Gilson, the son of the headmaster. When the two boys get into a fight, the headmaster, Robert's father, orders that they spend all of their time together for the remainder of the term. While both initially resent the assignment, Tolkien is soon accepted into Robert's small circle of friends, and the four, Tolkien, Gilson, Christopher Wiseman, and Jeffrey Smith, form a close friendship which grows with the years even as they splinter off after school to attend separate universities. Meanwhile, Tolkien continues his friendship with Edith, falling in love with her. Father Francis finds out about their relationship and recognizes that it is affecting Tolkien's grades, and so forbids him from pursuing her while under his guardianship. Tolkien is distraught, not wanting to lose the priest's financial support of his schooling. He relates the conversation to Edith, promising they will be able to be together when he reaches 21. Instead, Edith ends the relationship. Tolkien struggles at the University of Oxford but attracts the attention of Professor Joseph Wright, a prominent philologist. Tolkien realizes that language is his true passion and enrolls in Wright's class. Then the First World War breaks out. He and his friends all enlist in the British Armed Forces. Before Tolkien leaves for the European front, Edith returns and the two declare their love for each other. At the Battle of the Somme, I think that's how you pronounce it, Tolkien, suffering from trench fever, goes to look for Smith, convinced that he is calling him, but is unable to find him and collapses unconscious. He wakes in a hospital weeks later with Edith by his side to find that Smith and Gilson have been killed. Wiseman survived but was traumatized. Years later, Tolkien and Edith are married with 4 children, and Tolkien is now a professor at Oxford himself. The film ends with him inspired to write the famous opening of The Hobbit.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and we were having a little bit of a conversation as John was reading the description for the film. I thought I was surprised to see Mark here because I thought he'd be on the move because he's relocating. He's leaving the country.
Really?
Yes. He's moving on Wednesday, and but it's easier to have a functional apartment than throwing stuff out and just having a mattress on the floor. But he's mostly dumping everything. And basically, he got a job overseas for, teaching English as a second language.
So where exactly are you moving to, Mark?
But in the meantime, he's going back to Saudi.
Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah, that's always a weird thing. Now back to the movie. I don't know what to think about this film. It's kind of an odd duckling in a way. It's a very good movie. He's going to Riyadh, which is the capital city, which should be interesting because that's where my best friend was stationed back in the 90s. He didn't like it. Anyway, I thought this was a rather difficult film to judge. I felt the story was a little bit truncated. Like there was a ton of information missing that would have offered a lot more depth of characterization among the entire cast. But at the same time, this isn't a film being directed by Peter Jackson, and it's not a 3-hour movie. But in my mind, I'm like, maybe it should have been. I do think the cast was solid with what the script was and what they were given to do. But personally, I just never felt like I really got the whole depth of the relationship between the characters, particularly between the 4 guys, more so than between Tolkien and Edith Bratt. That was relatively well stated, but I never quite got the fellowship part that they were, obviously this was the catalyst for him to create what was the Fellowship of the Ring, but the bonds between those 4 just didn't seem as strong as what was written in the characters. in the books and in the other film. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I love the trench fever dream sequences and the implied notion of how that experience inspired him for certain scenes in the books.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it really captured the horror and the brutality of the actual battle that was going on around him. And people need to keep in mind that the Battle of the Somme was and is the most gruesome battle in world history. It cost over 1 million lives between British, French, Australian, Greece, South African, and German military and civilian population. It just felt like everything got downplayed in scope in that respect. And when you think about how grandiose Tolkien stories are, and you consider how he described the various battles in his books and how Peter Jackson presented the battles of Helm's Deep and the Battle of the Five Armies and stuff in the films, this kind of felt underwhelming. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of critics felt the same way, and this film bombed at the box office because of that. Unfortunately, it had a $20 million budget and only garnered $9 million at the box office.
Well, I also read that even the Tolkien family would not endorse this movie.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. That's a bummer. Yeah, like I said, didn't even earn half the money back. I do think, however, had we had gotten a film with the Peter Jackson scope and had seen more of the relationships between Tolkien and Father Francis, especially, there was a lot more to why he forbid him from seeing Edith. Edith was not of the same religion that Francis was. And so if you're going to be under my guardianship, you can't be with someone who's not of my religious standing. That was part of the reasoning. That was not really expressed in the movie. It was just his grades. And they never really told you how far his grades had dropped even.
Right.
So, you know, they never really, it was just very telling and not showing in the film in that respect.
Like, you know, to me, it really felt like an old-fashioned Hollywood biopic, meaning that, I mean, it's very handsomely presented, it's beautifully photographed, and it's well acted. And I would say that Nicholas Hoult is the reason to watch this movie. At least he was what made me keep watching.
Yes, I'll agree with you on that. I do think that he does a very nice job as Tolkien. Again, I do, especially with the trench fever stuff that was going on during the Somme, and his Batman, which is that's what his associate is called, a Batman. As funny as that sounds. His accompaniment that was looking for Gilson. It really felt like he was Frodo and the other one was Samwise guiding him through it.
Yeah.
It was a nice metaphor there. When he's wrapped up in the blankets and stuff, and he left him behind, you could almost, the way they filmed that, it was like Frodo being wrapped up in the spider webs, and left for whatever time there. But it's interesting in that part. Colm Meaney does a really nice job as Father Francis, I think.
Yeah.
But the problem is he's Colm Meaney. And it's almost like maybe because he played O'Brien for so long in the Star Trek, he's so recognizable as himself that it's very difficult for him to take almost any role and not that character O'Brien, but who he is as an actor. You recognize him as the actor more so than the role. That was a little bit of a difficulty thing. I think Lily does a nice job. Lily Collins does a nice job as Edith, but at no time does she strike me as 3 years older than Tolkien or as more mature than Tolkien, which she should have, because she was 19 or 20 when he was 16 at university when they met. So, I think that's another reason why, why Father Francis was against it, because she was an older woman who should be courting older gentlemen while he was a young, teenager. That was another reason why he was against their relationship, and that wasn't expressed either in the film. I thought it should have been.
And for me, one thing that I'd kind of hoped they would explore more was so when I saw this movie, I knew exactly two things about Tolkien before I watched this movie. I knew he was the author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and I knew he was a man of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I had hoped they would have explored a little more how his faith inspired his writings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't think they did.
Yeah, people mentioned that, and the director was like, well, yes, I see where you're coming from, but we didn't want to be overly preachy, overly religious in the film because that would turn people away. But that's part of exactly why people were interested in this film, like you. They knew he was a very religious Christian individual, and there was a lot of Christian overtones throughout the Lord of the Rings and his other works. And they wanted to see where that came from. And they really didn't get to see it. Mm-hmm. And that's probably part of why, as you said, the family didn't endorse the film. That could be why, because none of that was really talked about or shown. The financial hardships, by the way, that were mentioned, where Father Francis has to take the family to Birmingham. The father died. They owned a farm, and the father died. And, of course, she was terminally ill herself. I don't know. In the film, they never say what she has. But I know all I remember is they mentioned that she was terminally ill.
Right.
Might have been polio or something to that effect back in that era. That would have been very problematic. Because remember, this is World War I, not World War II, when this was going on. They didn't have the medicines for that type of disease at that time. So there's that. Mark Andrew Smith mentions C.W. Lewis was in his writing group, but gets more Christian credibility than Tolkien does. And that's true. But there's also, I think Lewis gets more Christian credibility than Tolkien because of the, what's the lion's name? I can't remember the lion's name. Aslan's resurrection, so to speak. And it's like a Christ figure character and a few other things in there that are very traditionally Judeo-Christian. Whereas Tolkien is a combination of different factors and factions, because he wasn't, the elves had a different kind of not pagan, but naturalistic Christian. Does that make sense?
I think so.
And yes, Gandalf was resurrected as Gandalf the White. Yes, I do remember that. But it wasn't. Aslan was not seen as a pagan wizard. Gandalf was. I hate to say that, but that's kind of how the difference kind of relays in there. But anyway, Yeah, but yeah, I agree. Lewis was given a lot more credibility as a Christian. I don't know. I never quite understood that, but I never really understood um, the hypocrisies of that anyway. um, but overall, like you said, this is a very traditional, old school type biopic. It kind of feels like a mini play. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But when you have a run time of almost 2 hours, and it feels like that, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird film in that respect. But
it's not a terrible film by any
oh no,
means,
no, no, no! Neither one of us are
but
saying it's a bad film.
I do feel they could have done more with it.
Yeah, that's basically they could have done more with it. Um, did you feel like you didn't even really know you knew Gilson in the film somewhat, but the other two, did you really feel anything other than they were just there?
No,
Yeah, and it
not
was like,
not really.
yeah. So it's like, which one were these characters supposed to be representational of? We already know that Tolkien was Frodo, and it's kind of interesting because if you think about the names of the people, um, of the Christopher Wiseman. Okay, well Wiseman, Sam Wise. So I guess that one would be that's who Sam Wise is Christopher Wiseman. But who is Jeffrey Smith supposed to be? And then I think about the Batman guy, who was a different person altogether, who wasn't part of their group. He's Sam Wise too, because of him being the guy who guides him through the trenches to try and find Gilson in the battle. So I was like, who's who? Type thing in that respect.
Or are they an amalgamation?
Right. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of those the characteristics of those gentlemen, to see how that translated in his mind to the characters, how much, to what sense. Because I mean, they talked about different aspects of the characters. I think it was Smith who was the poet. It's hard for me to remember exactly, but one of them was a poet, and one of them was a composer, and never really composed again after the war. I think that was the one who survived. Was the one that was the composer, but
I think you're right.
Yeah, Wiseman was the one who survived. And I think it was, but either way, they were trying to get to him, and it was just a little bit. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of which of those members were part of the Hobbit group, because it was clearly that they were implying that these were direct influences. But then I would have liked to just seen some of the characteristics of the characters in those actors or in those individuals in the script somehow. But other than that, it's just interesting how he did that. They also didn't really do a whole lot with his language knowledge. I mean, they touched on it very briefly. But once he got to Oxford, and he showed the whole Elvish language to the professor at Oxford, it was just quite interesting that they never really showed that even before World War One, he was actually starting the basis for a lot of this material. And granted, he'd been working on that stuff for years leading up to this as well, from his mother's tales of fantasy and stuff as well. But I just feel like I said, just didn't have enough depth to it, to me, I guess. And I also wonder how much Edith played into it, because they had wonderful scenes of banter between Tolkien and Edith
Mhm.
about language. There's a scene where they go to a restaurant together, and he's talking about his writing and stuff, and she's basically chastising him about the purpose of language. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting that they had her do that, because he's supposed to be this, I won't say highfalutin, but just really into that whole structure of language and history, and she's like hitting him really in almost a gut punch, and telling him that you're not even close to hitting the surface of what you think at that in that scene. I was just like, okay, that makes you wonder just how smart this woman actually was. And again, that because of the age difference. They were trying to show the age difference and maturity between the two characters at the time, because at that time he was like 17, she was 20 or 21, and that does make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize the difference and what she was allowed to do and what not allowed to do, because she was an immaculate pianist herself and was supposed to go to observatory and become a concert pianist. And for whatever reason, she didn't. Mostly, I guess, because whoever her guardians were just didn't have the money to pay for her to go to university for music or whatever. So she didn't get to be anything she really wanted to be. And that was kind of what her that was part of why she ended the relationship, was she resented the fact that he could go if he left her behind, more or less. Mm-hmm. And that he would choose that for years, because she can't do anything in the meantime except wait for him, which I think that was kind of why they didn't express that, but they should have.
Right.
It was there in subtext, but it wasn't. Sometimes I think this stuff needs to be presented and told in the action as well, but I don't know. Anyway, let's see. I'm trying to find. Okay. Rating. What did you give this film?
I gave it a 3.5, because for me, it's just like, it just sits right in the middle. It's not a bad film, but they could have done more with it.
Okay, I'm pretty much where you're at, but I'm a little bit below that. I only gave it a 3. But I 3 to 3.5 is pretty good, I think, for what this film is.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been a lot more. I would have liked, but exactly what do you show? I mean, like I said, there's a lot of characterization that needed to be put in there, but I also would have liked to have seen the more of the Battle of Somme and show the trauma of that. I think would have been a lot better too, because I think that would have really played into the level of what we got to see with the films that Jackson made. Now, granted, Jackson films cost like 5 times as much as this film does.
At least.
But even with a $20 million budget, they should have been able to do a bit more with the battle than they did, I think. But so that's pretty much our discussion on that. So I wish we had a little bit more to say about it, but there really isn't much else to add.
No, I can't think of anything.
But so I guess next week we'll be back on Friday to discuss a classic horror film and a modern horror film. Our classic film will be The Undying Monster from 1942. And our modern film will be House of Shadows from 2020. Again, we'll be back at 8 p.m. on Friday to talk about that. And then this weekend on Sunday, January 9th from 12 to 4, we'll have a live draw here on the channel. The theme is a mixed bag. That means I'll draw a bunch of different stuff, different characters and different sizes. Some will be trading cards, some will be 8.5 by 11 probably, but we'll see. But that'll be our topic for that. Oops, wrong button. We don't need to be up that close. You don't want to be all up into people's faces. But we appreciate you as always coming to watch the show. If you enjoyed our video, or you think others might, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from this channel. As always, I thank you for your support on the show. So there's John. If you want to reach out to me on social media, you can find me at Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven, at Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. I'm on DeviantArt.com/BrightRaven if you want to look at my artwork. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis BrightRaven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions or comments, you can email me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. And if I don't get back to you on that channel, try lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. That's all for now. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Good night, folks.